Since I already talked a bit about the 2010s decade as it relates to me in the last video, I'll keep this introduction short. With these next two videos, I'm going to be talking about my top 20 favorite movies of the 2010s, but one for animated and another for live action. Why am I making separate lists? Well, because, say it with me everyone, animation is not a genre, it's a medium. This decade was quite explosive for animated movies since there are now more major mainstream and independent studios than ever, and more films come out in just a year than ever before. One of the major reasons the Oscars didn't have a category for Best Animated Feature before 2001 is because there just weren't that many major animated films in a year. Now, there's no shortage of them, and I think that's a great thing. So let's get started counting down my favorite animated movies of the decade. I'll try going over them a bit quicker than my last video. Number 20. Rio. If there's one group of animals that I love almost as much as dolphins, it's parrots, so of course I would love Rio. It's one of Blue Sky's better outings. It has a pretty basic plot, but it's executed very well. It has some incredibly vibrant visuals and great music. I think it's the closest Blue Sky has come to feeling like a Disney or Pixar film, or even a DreamWorks film. Number 19. Rango. Rango is probably one of the most unique looking films on this list. I know a lot of people call it ugly with how realistic the animals look, but it really owns the style. It's one of the few animated films that's a western, and that gritty look really fits the genre. Number 18. My Little Pony the Movie. You may have expected this one at some point in this list because of my last video. At one point I wasn't sure if Friendship is Magic would be getting its own movie because of the Equestria Girls spin-offs, but I'm glad it did get this movie because it's a really fun time. The animation looks very good and improved compared to the show, and all of the songs are amazing. They're some of Daniel Ingram's best work. Number 17. Kung Fu Panda 2. Who knew the Kung Fu Panda franchise from DreamWorks would be not just good, but really good? I think the second movie is the best one of the trilogy. It has Po learning about his past and what happened to his parents. The villain is the best that DreamWorks has ever had. Shin can have some funny moments, but also be very threatening. Number 16. Anomaly. This is a stop-motion film that has a very intimate setting of a guy staying at a hotel and meeting a woman there. But it's much more than just that. It's a film about being bored of life and relationships, but then finding someone new and exciting. Check it out if you're in the mood for something a bit different and very adult. Number 15. Klaus. This has to be some of the best 2D animation I have ever seen. It used a lighting system that makes the characters look like they have more depth. But Klaus is more than just pretty. It's an origin story for Santa Claus that feels very fresh. It uses the concept of sending letters as the basis for the plot, and I think that's just genius. Like, why didn't anyone think of telling it like that before? I watched Klaus 3 times this past holiday and loved it every time, so I think it's earned its place as a new holiday classic. Number 14. Your Name. This was an anime film that really took the world by storm. It became the second largest box office film in Japan, right behind Spirited Away. There's a good reason too. The story of this film is really great. The plot is about a teenage boy and girl who switch bodies every so often, and start to develop this relationship with each other. Switching bodies is nothing new, but the way this film does it and where the story goes is executed very well. If you haven't seen it, you're in for a treat. Number 13. The Red Turtle. This was a joint effort between Studio Ghibli and Wild Bunch. It's about a guy who becomes stranded on this island with no company but a red turtle. That's really all I can say about the plot because I don't want to give away any major details. I went into this film completely blind, so I would want you to experience it the same way. Just don't watch any trailers. The only thing you really need to know is that this film has no dialogue, so it can be enjoyed by anyone from any language. Number 12. Moana. You know, after I first saw Moana, I didn't think it was that special. But then it really warmed up to me and I ended up listening to the soundtrack on loop the day after I saw it. Out of all the musical films that Disney Animation Studios have done in the 2010s, I think Moana is the best one. Yes, even better than Frozen. I love Moana's personality, she's a character that wants to explore and see the world, and Maui is a lot of fun, and Mini Maui on his tattoos was a treat to see with some 2D on 3D implementation. Number 11. Ernest and Celestine. This is probably one of the prettiest 2D films on this list. It has a very unique watercolor aesthetic that is just beautiful. The story is about a mouse and a bear meeting and becoming friends, while their separate societies are incredibly different. It's one of the cutest films on this list, so if you like cute things and you haven't seen it, please give it a watch. Number 10. A Silent Voice. Out of all the films I have on this list, this one is probably the most grounded. There's nothing fantastical about it like switching bodies, but there is a great story. The plot is about a deaf girl who is bullied by the main character as a child, and he is regretful for the way he acted in the past and wants to try and make up for it. It's a very emotional and sometimes heartbreaking story. This also has some of the best character animation I've ever seen in an anime. It makes them emote that much more effectively. Number 9. WreckIt Ralph. This was such a fun concept that I knew I was going to like it when I first heard about it. Video game characters coming to life when no one is playing? It's basically the same concept as Toy Story but with games. A lot of people were worried that it would be more focused on the cameos of the video game characters, but it really became its own world with its own original characters. It's a story about an outcast who is a villain in his own game, but it's just his job. He's not a bad guy. Number 8. How to Train Your Dragon. I think this started one of the best film series for DreamWorks. It's a pretty basic story about a boy and a creature that has been done a million times before, but is probably one of the best executions of that story. I love the way Toothless acts almost like a cat, and I really like how the relationship between all the main characters evolves throughout the series, especially with Hiccup and his dad. I had a hard time deciding whether to put the first film or the second film on this spot, but I think I'll go with the first because it started everything. Number 7. Toy Story 3. Even though we have Toy Story 4 now, I still consider 3 to be the best conclusion for the trilogy of films. I think it had a big effect on me and the people my age because we grew up with the first 2 films. Not much to say about this other than, yeah, I think it should have ended here. Number 6. Wolf Children. I think this is Hosada's best film. It's about a single human mother trying to raise 2 werewolf pups. Even though the kids aren't like normal children, it really shows just how difficult it can be to raise kids. A lot of the film is very wholesome and sort of slice of life. It's probably the most relaxing film on this list, though I don't know how relaxing being a single mother can be. Number 5. Zootopia. Here's a film I have watched many times, thanks to a certain someone. I can quote so much of this movie in everyday conversation. Other than having a friend that is obsessed with it, I've also watched it a lot because it's just really rewatchable. There's so much to see in the city they designed that I wish I could just explore it. Here's hoping the next Kingdom Hearts game has a Zootopia world. Zootopia just doesn't look cool though. The film itself has themes about prejudice. I love how the film starts out having you think it's mainly going to be about Judy being discriminated against for her small stature, but then it turns around and it's about Nick being a predator. It's just a really well told story, and I think it's the best film that Disney Animation Studios made in the 2010s. Number 4. Inside Out. Now this is a film that made a lot of people say Pixar's back. After having a few years of disappointments or films that were just meh, Inside Out punched everyone in the heart. I think one of the best things about this movie is that there is no real villain. It's more about an inner conflict with the emotions. I love Joy as the main character. She just wants Riley to have a happy life, but she needs to learn that it's okay to be sad, which I think is a good lesson for everyone really. Not everyone can be happy all the time. Number 3. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'll say what I said on Twitter after I saw it. This is the most comic book movie to ever comic book. Seriously, the plot of the film is very comic book-like. When I first watched it, I knew I was in for something special. It has one of the best opening sequences that make you feel like you're in for quite a treat. It has this combination of 3D and 2D animation to make something beautiful. It has one of the best original scores I've ever heard for an animated movie. It's very witty with its comedy, but also tells a very compelling Spider-Man story. They took full advantage of the Spider-Man license to make something really special. Number 2. Song of the Sea. This was from the same director of The Secret of Kells, so I was expecting something really beautiful when I heard about this film. But I never thought it would be quite this amazing. Just looking at it, you can tell it's a work of art with this excellent style. It's about siblings and their journey. One is a normal boy, and the other is a Selkie, a human that can turn into a seal. It has a theme of loss throughout the film, and how to accept it. In my review of Song of the Sea, I called it an Irish Spirited Away, and I still think that describes it pretty well. Alright, before we go to number 1, here are some honorable mentions. Sausage Party. I don't care, I think it's funny. The Illusionist. If you like Triplets of Belleville, you'll like this. The Tale of Princess Kaguya. A more stylized Studio Ghibli film. Equestria Girls Rainbow Rocks. I mean, the music's really good. The Peanuts Movie. An awesome adaptation from Blue Sky, but I like Rio better. Only by a bit, though. It's Such a Beautiful Day. From the same guy that did that Rejected short, though this is more philosophical. Alright, on to number 1. And my number 1 animated movie of the decade is... The Lego Movie. This may not be surprising to a lot of you if you've been watching my channel for a while. But yeah, I love The Lego Movie. One of the main reasons I have it at my number 1 is because when I saw it in theaters, I just could not stop smiling. I was grinning ear to ear throughout the entire movie. Many people thought that The Lego Movie would be some cheap cash grab that would just be an overglorified commercial to sell toys. But it really became its own thing, celebrating the concept of play and imagination, which is what LEGO, the company itself, strives to do. A lot of it may be nostalgia on my part because I played with LEGO a lot as a kid, but the great quality of the film is still there. You should watch my video about why I think the LEGO Movie is so great if you haven't already. I'd also like to give a shout out to LEGO Batman and LEGO Movie 2 because I think they're also really good. I didn't want to talk about them before or in honorable mentions because you might have guessed what my number 1 was. And that's it. Let me know what your favorite animated movies of the 2010s were. And I'll see you next time when I talk about my favorite live-action movies of the decade. Bye! And a big thanks to my top patrons on Patreon and my top members on YouTube. So thank you to DJ Skywalker, Random Bun, Ryan Walterson, Sean Model, Strumpet, Deli18, EditMan RGG2, and Malik Webster. Thank you so much for your support.